Is lying always wrong? What about stealing to feed your family, or breaking out of jail when you've been wrongly accused? Today we see Plato's view on these difficult questions in video 3 of our series on the book The Last Days of Socrates by Plato. Check out the other videos in the series over here. So let's get into the summary. We'll be looking at the third dialogue in this book, the Crito, which handles ethics. Ethics is a study of morality, which just means what is right or what is wrong. And this dialogue follows a conversation between Crito and Socrates. Socrates is currently in jail and he's awaiting his execution. And Crito has come to visit him and begs him to try and escape. Socrates says that he shall handle this dilemma of whether or not to escape like he's handled every other question and problem in his life, with reasoning and dialogue, and then he will choose the best option. And then a dialogue ensues about whether escaping is the right action. And so Crito starts the dialogue by bringing up 4 arguments for escaping. Firstly, what will people think of his friends if they do not try everything possible to save him? People will not think that Socrates did not want to be saved, and therefore his friends will be dishonored. His second argument is that Socrates must not worry about the costs to his friends in terms of money or punishment. They are willing to pay whatever cost is needed to save him. And thirdly, he offers an alternative view on justice, which involves doing good to one's friends and harm to one's enemies. And his final point is that Socrates has 2 sons, and it is his obligation as their father, and according to moral excellence, to raise and educate his sons. Socrates then responds. We'll first talk about his general argument for not escaping, and then his specific responses to each of Crito's arguments. He asks Crito if he believes that one's first priority should be living well, and not just living. Crito agrees, and then Socrates states that all other factors are then less important compared to this one. They then go on to talk about whether one should ever act unjustly, and they both agree that no matter what another does to them, they should never act unjustly to another. And then they both go on to agree that even if someone is acting unjustly towards you, you should not act unjustly. And then Socrates goes on to talk about the city, and imagines the city to have its own voice, and gives the argument on the side of the city. He says that he had the choice at any time to leave the city if he did not like the laws and how it was governed. But because he chose to remain in the city and share all the benefits that the city had to offer, he must now abide by its laws. And whether it is in war or by the court's orders, he must do whatever the city commands. And if he does not do this, he will be guilty of injustice on 3 accounts. Firstly, he did not obey the city when it was his creator. Secondly, he did not obey the city when it brought him up. And finally, on agreeing to remain in the city, he has agreed to its laws, and then must either persuade the city to change its laws or abide by them. So now let's look at Socrates' thoughts on Crito's arguments. The first argument is the argument around what people will think. Here he uses the example of a person in training. When you're in training for something, do you listen to the person who's training you, the expert, or do you listen to what everyone else tells you to do? And Crito agrees that you should listen to the expert, and I'm sure we all agree with this, as listening to others could possibly harm one's training. And therefore, Socrates' friends should not care about what other people think is the right action. They should only care about what an expert thinks is the right action, or what an expert would do. In terms of Crito's second argument, Socrates says that he cannot be the cause of his friends' suffering because they help him to escape, as they could be exiled or lose their property or have many other types of suffering by helping him, and this would not be a just action. Then Socrates goes on to talk about Crito's alternative view on justice. Here he reminds Crito of their view that they should never act unjustly to another, and says that if they believed before that this was the right way to act, then they should not change their view now just because they are facing death. He then goes on to talk about what would happen if he does run away and go to one of the other well-governed cities. And he asks Crito, would not the same fate befall him as has happened here? And then he would constantly be on the move from city to city, and this is no way to live. And how could he be talking about goodness and justice when he himself did not hold up to these standards? And then on the last point of Crito's regarding his children, he says that if he left his sons in Athens to get the best education, would his friends not look after his sons, whether or not he was alive? And if he did bring them with him when he escaped the city, they would become foreigners, and they would constantly have to suffer moving from city to city, and then would not get as good an education. So he believes that it would be better that they stay in Athens, and whether or not he was around would not make a difference. So how can you apply this in difficult decisions in your life? What we can see from the dialogue is that Socrates is a firm believer in always acting justly. This means that one should choose an action based on what one feels is the right action, and not based on what is the easiest option, or the option that will benefit you the most. Later in the dialogue, he returns to this concept and says that one should give the most priority to being just above all other factors. And you may not agree that being just is the most important thing, but I think you can still use this concept, which is the prioritizing of values. What one would do is make a list of values and rank them according to importance, and then remind yourself of this list when making difficult decisions, as it can put things into perspective. Secondly, we can see that Socrates is open to new ideas, as new ideas can bring new insights and thus can help you come to the best possible conclusion. And finally, Socrates talks about listening to experts, which would involve two possible options. Firstly, finding an expert and then asking them about the difficult decisions you have, or studying experts and then trying to imagine what they would do in the difficult situations. Thanks for watching, and please let me know in the comments below if there are any other books you'd like me to do a review of, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos.